Note to self, always remember to empty your trash before recording a video so your phone doesn't run out of space when you're almost done recording. So yeah, here I am, making a video rating every album I've ever listened to, instead of working on part 4 of my Spotify series that I have not updated since last school year. I'll get to it eventually. But really though, I need to get to work. But anyway, yeah, that's what this video is. I'm gonna go over each album, give my thoughts on it, and rate it on a scale from 0 to 100 based off of how much I liked it. Also on the side, I'll be giving my favorite and least favorite songs from the album. And my scoring system is different than the scoring system you're probably thinking of, so in case you're wondering what all my scores mean, please refer to this handy charts. I'm gonna be going in no particular order, and this video is gonna be pretty long because I have 15 albums to go through. And I'm already absolutely livid because I was just recording another take of this video, but it stopped about 13 minutes in because my phone ran out of space because I forgot to empty my trash. But yeah, anyway, let's go on to our first album, which is Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sounds. It's a really good, I don't know what genre this album goes into. I don't really think this is R&B, that's more of his first album, but yeah, I like it. My expectations were pretty low for this album after I got to the third song in a row with the word sex in the title, but this ended up being pretty good. I love the production on this album. Timberland and the Neptunes absolutely killed it. I do have some critiques though. Mostly that I do think the interludes should be separated from the actual songs they're in because they ended up making the tracks really long. Like there's some tracks here that are like 7 minutes long because of the interludes. I'm really not into long songs. It's the whole reason why I haven't listened to 2020 Experience. Majority of the songs there are like over 8 minutes long. I also think the end of this album was kind of a drag. Like, after Summer Love, this went on a long string of slow songs, which is totally fine. But the thing is, this was 3 songs, which were 5.5 minutes each, totaling up to about 17 minutes of this, which was an entire third of this album. And it got just kind of after a while, and I just stopped listening. I started to lose interest. But everything else I do like. This is a 74. Next up is the Maroon 5 Songs About Jane. I've went on a whole video talking about the decline of Maroon 5, how they started off as such a good band but declined into the absolute abomination they are today. Songs About Jane is their debut album. This is by far their best album. Well, from a band standpoint, but yeah. Songs About Jane is true Maroon 5. This is when Adam Levine actually cared more about his band making good music than making money and being famous. They actually sounded like a band here. They were actually playing their instruments. This sounds absolutely nothing like the garbage they make today. I bet if you played some of these songs in front of a new Maroon 5 fan, they probably wouldn't even know this was supposed to be Maroon 5. Most of the songs here were pretty mid-tempo. There weren't a lot of upbeat songs here. The only real upbeat songs here were the first 3 songs, which were my favorite ones here: Harder to Breathe, This Love, and Shiver. Songs like Shiver is what Maroon 5 is supposed to be. But no, we ended up with Red Pill Blues instead. And yes, I sincerely apologize for what my least favorite song here is. I know everyone else loves She Will Be Loved, but it's not really me. It's less of a band thing, more of just an Adam thing. But yeah, moving on is Lady Gaga's Chromatica, which is an outstanding album. I gave this a 95. Yes, I'm a straight person who loves Lady Gaga's music. Deal with it. She released this album about the time I started getting into her music, but I never actually listened to this album until about February. This is the second album of hers I've listened to, and this is way different sounding than some of her other pop albums. Like, back then, her pop music was a lot more weird sounding. Like, it's the whole reason why she stopped making pop music for a while after she released Art Pop back in 2013, because everyone hated it because of how weird it was. This album is much different than some of her other stuff. I absolutely love it. It's a lot more... I don't know what to describe it. I don't know what's the worst word. What's the correct word? I don't know if aesthetically pleasing is it. I don't know what. But yeah, it's mostly based off of the whole production thing. The production sounds way different than her other stuff, but I love it. And yes, I know I just said that Songs About Jane is their best album, but I gave It Won't Be Soon Before Long a higher score than that. And that is no mistake. I know everyone else is always that kind of person that is like, oh, Songs About Jane is their best album. Everything after that is worse and worse and worse. But I'm not that kind of guy. Sure, Songs About Jane was an excellent album. But there were a couple of songs there I wasn't really that big of a fan of, like She Will Be Loved. And I thought Secret was kind of a drag as well. But I enjoyed every single song here. This album definitely has a lot more of a pop sound to it. There's a lot more pop songs, like Makes Me Wonder and If I Never See Your Face Again, while still having some more mid-tempo songs that I also really love, like Won't Go Home Without You and Nothing Lasts Forever. Like this album's like a perfect mix of pop and not pop. And I've only listened, those are the only two Maroon 5 albums I've ever listened to. I haven't listened to Hands All Over or Overexposed yet. And I absolutely refuse to listen to V, Red Pill Blues, or Geordie. Those albums are so ass that if they were a person, they'd be Kim Kardashian. Now we have Ed Sheeran with Equals. And yes, I gave this a 72. I listened to this the day it came out, and I actually liked it. Now after that, I looked up some reviews of it to see what other people thought, and the responses were extremely mixed. Everything I saw here, everyone either absolutely loved it or absolutely despised it. There doesn't really seem to be any in between. Anthony Fantano gave this album a 2 out of 10, which made me a lot less confident about liking this, but I don't know, I'm not going to let that change my opinion on it. I mean, this is the same guy who gave My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy a 6. People love to rag on Ed Sheeran because his music sounds all bland and generic, but I'm a person who actually appreciates his work. One thing I hear a lot about this album is that Ed sounds like he's starting to sell out, and he's just trend chasing now, and Plus and X are much better than this. I can't say for sure if that's true or not because I myself have never listened to Plus or X, but I have listened to a couple of the songs like Don't Sing and You Need Me, I Don't Need You, and those definitely sound way different than anything else on Equals. This album is definitely a lot more pop sounding. I guess you could say this is about the overexposed of Ed's career, but I honestly don't really mind it. Next up is Rush with Permanent Waves. My dad is an absolute diehard Rush fan who is probably watching this video right now, which is kind of an invasion of privacy. And he's probably going to see me giving this a 69, and may I remind him that a 69 is equivalent to a decent. It means I still like this album. My dad has a record player, and I always hear him listening to this album in particular on it all the time. So I decided to listen to this one for fun. And I don't really listen to that much rock music. It's one of the genres I listen to the least, but I did like this. And that's pretty much all I have to say. About Jacob's Ladder, it's not all that bad, but it just repeats itself over and over, and it gets kind of repetitive after a while. Yes, Fragile is another album that my dad likes to listen to, that I also listen to Spotify on fun. I don't even know what I'm talking about. That I also listen to on Spotify for fun, and I really like this one as well. It's definitely a lot more different. I think this could go as progressive rock, but I'm not really sure the correct definition for progressive rock. All I know is Pink Floyd. The thing that's kind of weird here is how every track on this album is either 8 minutes long or 45 seconds long, but whatever. Another thing, the opening track to this album is actually the JoJo To Be Continued theme, which is cool. And I have Canes and Brames as my least favorite track, not because it's bad, but because it just feels kind of shoehorned in, like it doesn't really belong. Alright, now we have Taylor Swift with 1989. I only listened to this album once, and it's when I was cooking dinner. This was playing from my speaker, and my dad was in the living room, so I felt uncomfortable the entire time. So I never really got to properly experience this album. But when I listened to it, I was just feeling kind of uncomfortable the whole time, which is why I only gave this a 62. I will say, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I do like Taylor Swift's music. Yes, which is why I decided to listen in 1989, which is her first actual pop album she's made. She used to be a country star until she released Red. So I decided to listen to this. I liked all of the singles on this album, like Shake It Off, Blank Space, Out of the Woods, and Style. But all of the songs here that weren't singles just sound really generic sounding. And they all sounded extremely similar. Like, all you had to do is stay and How You Get the Girl sounded almost identical. And I Wish You Would sounds so generic, it's like the embodiment of pop music from the mid-2010s. I did like Clean, but I thought I Know Places was absolute ass. And what I resent the most is how New Romantics wasn't on his album. This wasn't on the original album, it was only on the deluxe version. I really resent that. What I think she should have done is replace I Know Places with that song, because I love New Romantics. I mean, this album is just okay. Maybe if I listen to this another time, I'll probably like it more, but right now it's just a 62. Alright, now we have the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is when they all started taking drugs and experimenting with their style a lot more. This album is far from their early work, and that's a good thing. I love how they experimented. A lot of the songs here have a much more hippie vibe than the Beatles' old stuff. I mean, I think this album is what inspired hippies to be a thing. Now, Within Without You is my favorite song here, which is probably the hippiest song I've ever listened to. I mean, I'm not a hippie, but I do like this album. Okay, now we have Shock Value, and I have a lot of thoughts on this one. This is the only album here that's not a singer or band album, but a producer album. Timberlake has got to be probably my favorite music producer. All his music, all the beats he produces is absolute fire. Like, all of the beats and music he makes sounds all unique in their own way. They sound really interesting. Not the generic kind of stuff that you probably hear all the time. In a way, his music almost sounds strange, but in a good way. And I like how he doesn't just stick to one genre. He produces a lot of different genres. Like, he'd produce Jay-Z and Missy Elliott, but he'd also produce people like Nelly Furtado and Justin Timberlake. Which makes me wonder why I was expecting this album to only be one genre. This started off as a rap album. The first 7 songs were all rap songs. I absolutely loved the first part of this album. I loved it all. I loved Oh Timbaland. I loved Give It To Me. I loved Release, The Way They Are, Bounce. I really liked Come and Get Me. And then we had track number 7, which started off good. The first verse was good until we got to the chorus, which I ended up skipping the song after that because it was just a guy chanting the words "kill yourself" over and over, and that's when I stopped listening to it. Because I really don't need that. Then we have Board Meeting, which is sort of like an interlude to the second section of this album, which I like to call the horny section, because all the songs here sound extremely horny. And that section only lasts 2 songs, but 2 songs is more than enough. Fantasy was absolutely unbearable to listen to, not because of the production. Timbaland's production on that song is totally fine. It's the woman's voice who was singing. Her voice was so annoying that this ended up being the second song in this album I ended up skipping. Which I think was an okay thing to do, because this album is already over an hour long and 17 songs. And after Scream, we go to the third section, which is pretty much everything else. They don't really have any specific genre. It was the end of this album was all just kind of mixed bag. Some of the stuff here was really good, like Throw It On Me and Miscommunication, while other songs there were just kind of like Bombay. And I really liked the Elton John collaboration. It was pretty nice. After the rap section, I thought this would be like a 97, but It was all just kind of good, but not great after that, which made me only give it an 83. Trust me, I wanted to give this a much higher score. I couldn't even decide on what my favorite song was, which is why I have 2 songs, as well as 2 least favorite songs. This video is getting really long now, so let's speed it up. We have Lady Gaga with Born This Way. This is her first album I've listened to. This is also an hour long. I really love it. But yeah, it's clear that this album is metal inspired. I always say expired. Metal inspired. The production on this album is absolutely incredible. I absolutely love it. This is definitely some of Lady Gaga's weird music. Not as weird as art pop, but just as weird as it can get without being too weird. But some of the songs here are a little too weird for me that I'm not really a fan of. Everyone liked Bloody Mary, but I'm not too hot on Bloody Mary. Government Hooker is one of those so bad it's good kind of songs. And Heavy Metal Lover is my least favorite one because of her voice at the beginning of the song. She wasn't even really singing in the song, she was more of just saying. I meant the production on the song was absolutely wonderful, but the vocals are just But despite the flaws, this is still an awesome album, and I give it an 85. Alright, the Beatles with Abbey Road. This is their final album they've made. This is my favorite album I've listened to so far. Yes, everyone always says that Get Back is their final album. That's the final album they've released, but Abbey Road is actually the final album they've ever recorded. Everything here is really, really good. The best part of this album is the Abbey Road medley on side B. That probably has to be my favorite part of this album. And I can't really think of anything else to say, but that's fine because this video is getting too long as it is. We have Pink Floyd with The Dark Side of the Moon. It's one of those progressive rock albums that I also really like. Now, I like those kind of albums where all the songs go together well. Like the end of one song is the beginning of the next one. Forgot to mention, but Shock Value was kind of like that. Like the album was telling a story, which it was. From what I heard, this album is about how one of the band members started going crazy or something like that. And all the songs here are about fears he had, like death, money, time, and war. It's a really cool project, and I really like it. So, we have 2 albums to go now. We have Michael Jackson with Thriller. And pretty much the only reason I've listened to this album is because it's the most bought record ever. So I listened to it, and I thought this was a great one. I know I only gave this a 79. 79 is still a really high score, but it's actually one of the lowest scores in this video. But it's a really good 80s pop record. And I only just now found out that Paul McCartney was actually in one of the songs here. My least favorite song here, The Lady in My Life, was just kind of forgettable. Like, no matter how many times I listen to this album, I can never remember how that song goes. And finally, we have Dua Lipa with Future Nostalgia. And that's exactly what this album is. This is one of the most recent albums in this video. But this album has a lot of that 80s kind of production sounding stuff. It sounds really cool. I listened to her first album on a CD, and I'm not reviewing that one, but Future Nostalgia sounds way different than that one, and I like Future Nostalgia much better than their debut album. My one thought here, though, is that Levitating should have been the final song here, not Boys Will Be Boys. I'm not really sure if Boys Will Be Boys should even be on here. Not because of the message. No, sexual harassment is not okay. No, but like the vibe that song has sounds like it belongs more on her first album, not this one. I'm not even sure this is a real good way to end the album at all. But yeah. And that's pretty much all there is to say. That's the end of this video.